And welcome to the Planet X podcast. I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and it's been a really long time since we've done one of these. Kind of like the Hot Tag podcast. We took a little bit of a break, but now we're back, and hopefully we'll be doing this a little more regularly. I guess we're just gonna try to get caught up on some stuff, I guess, and see where the conversation takes us tonight.
Yeah, I've been watching movies. I've been watching TV. I've been getting myself. I've even been reading like a nerd.
Like a nerd. Wow.
Like a nerd. There's been a lot going on. There's been good. There's been bad. We're in that wonderful time of year where they're starting to show all the trailers for the summer movies, the spring and summer blockbusters,
which we got a fair dose of yesterday during the Super Bowl.
Yep, yeah. What a Super Bowl! Jesus Christ!
Yeah, I wasn't watching. I was because we've talked in the past where I've ditched cable, and I was thinking, maybe I'll go to the bar and I'll watch it. But I'm like, I don't care that much. It's, it's not like it's the Stanley Cup Finals or anything like that. I was getting these text messages from my father all night, like, 7-0 Atlanta, 14-0 Atlanta, 21-0 Atlanta, 28-3 Atlanta. I'm like, all right, sweet. So then I found it online and watched the last 5 minutes in overtime. And fucking Tom Brady.
Yeah, you gotta love a good villain.
And he is a good villain.
He cheats and wins, and people love him.
He cheats, he wins. He's got like a supermodel wife, millions of dollars. One of my friends actually posted on either Twitter or Facebook or both that 2017 must be the year of the rich white guys with immigrant wives.
Yeah. Well, one of my buddies, when we were watching the game, he says every time he sees Bill Belichick and Tom Brady standing next to each other, it makes him think of Emperor Palpatine and Anakin Skywalker.
Yes. Pretty much.
And I said, does that mean that one day Eli Manning is going to have to teach Tom Brady's son how to kill him?
Yes.
Okay.
Might have to. That would be fun.
They are the Patriots. I've said it with a bunch of things. They are the wrestling villains. They're the Four Horsemen or the NWO that they just cheat and win and get away with it and are still popular. They're a team of supervillains that have gathered together to.
Yeah, they really are.
Brady, Belichick. Family Guy did a Rob Gronkowski episode this season, and I'd explain to my wife. She's like, "Is this like a real guy? And why would they make him look?" I'm like, "This is what he does."
They're not making him up. This is a real guy. This is what he does.
I don't know if you saw it, but he moved in next to Peter, and it was the party's still 6:00 in the morning every night. Is that and I'm finding I'm showing her videos on YouTube of like the Gronkowski party cruise and things like that. And they're at midnight had described him as a dinosaur who found a time machine and came to the future to play football.
Yeah,
he really is. I explained to somebody else who didn't know much about football or who Rob Gronkowski was. That if they had seen, I asked them if they'd ever seen Revenge of the Nerds, and I'm like, imagine if Ogre from Revenge of the Nerds was a real guy.
Yeah,
that's Rob Gronkowski.
That is Rob Gronkowski.
And I'm telling my wife, I'm like, not only is that, but at one point his backup was a serial killer.
Yeah. True story.
I don't know how they can win so many games with so many, all the cheating. And they got a bunch of little white guys they throw the ball to, too, for a team that wins all the time.
Well, that ball does weird things when Tom Brady throws it.
Yeah. Strings attached to it. Maybe they put like a little tiny drone inside of it.
Maybe.
Because the drones were a big part of this year's Super Bowl, because Lady Gaga had a bunch of synchronized drones doing stuff.
And because I didn't watch the game, I didn't catch the halftime show, and again, like, I could care less about the halftime show. It had that halftime show. Really, it's never anybody I want to see, with maybe the exception of like Springsteen or Prince in the past 10 years.
I have to say, this was the best halftime show since the Springsteen and the Prince one.
That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing she was great.
There was no,
there's this one like meme or whatever I keep seeing of her like jumping off of something.
She like at the end of it, she's like, bye everybody, and launches herself off the stage. Somebody throws her a football, she catches it midair, and she's like, she just jumps off the thing.
Did she jump to her death?
I don't know. I think she might have teleported.
Teleported to whatever planet she's from?
They dropped her in on a wire like old WCW Sting.
Okay.
And then she's singing and flipping around on a harness, and she's there. She's got dozens of dancers. She's doing costume changes.
I'm gonna YouTube this.
You're gonna have to check it out. And she sang. There was no gimmicky things. There was no. And now here's Diana Ross for 30 seconds or something like that. Or wheeling out people, or somebody had to rap. Nobody came out and rapped for 20 seconds. For some reason, like they seem like they always have to shoehorn in a bunch of stuff. They just let her come out, perform, and she has catchy songs. She has songs that people know. If you look at it for the past, I know you're not a fan of hers, but in the past 10, 12 years, she's put out some pretty good pop music.
Yeah, I don't dislike her. I don't hate her, but I'm not a fan, because this is going back a couple of years ago when we were watching that thing where she was doing duets with Tony Bennett.
Yeah, which my mother loves. My mother loves Lady Gaga because of the Tony Bennett duets.
Yeah,
and he kind of did like an introduction for her for the halftime show. They had some pre-recorded piece.
Okay,
and we're sitting there, and I'm like, oh, there's Lady Gaga's dad, Tony Bennett. And so a couple of people that were with me were like, really? That's her dad?
No.
And I'm like, no, they're just friends. And one of the people that was with me was my friend's 17-year-old son, who goes, who's Tony Bennett?
Oh, God.
And I'm like, he's like Frank Sinatra. I'm like, he had his first hit in like 1939. Where for him, if you put that in a context, that's like if somebody told us, oh yeah, that guy was a big deal in like 1882.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
When you start thinking about how far removed some of this stuff is. But I gotta say, it was an all-around enjoyable entertainment experience. That it was a good football game. It was
and it didn't look like it was going to be. It looked like it was going to be a blowout.
The only reason we were keeping it on was because we liked watching Tom Brady get his ass kicked. But then they started creeping back in it, and they're like, he's going to fucking win this. Because it's just that momentum. And, I was saying to you earlier before we started the show, that when you get somebody that's that good and you give them a chance, they're going to take it and they're going to pull stuff out of their ass. And they're going to beat you. And that's what happened. It was a momentum shift like I've never seen, where the Patriots came back and scored 31 points.
Yeah, unanswered points.
After being down, the Falcons Temco bowled them and scored 21 points in a quarter.
Yeah.
That was old school. Like, I got Bo Jackson, and I'm going to run a bunch of times on you,
Yeah.
put up 21 and a quarter.
And I got the text message from my father when they went up 21-0, like, Brady just got picked off and he ran it back for an 83-yard touchdown. I'm like, this is fantastic.
But they came back like a horror movie.
And speaking of going, they did. And speaking of Temco Ball, I've played it on the NES Classic.
Oh yeah, how is that?
It's fun. They don't have the rights to the player names anymore.
That's what I had heard.
But you get on you get on the Raiders and you hand the ball off to the running back and he's just gone. He runs over Boz. He's just gone.
I was playing it, my original cassette. I was playing over the summer, and my niece and nephew were sitting there watching me playing, and my nephew's like, "Who's B.O. Jackson?"
It's like, you don't understand. You weren't there.
And I'm like, he was this guy. He was at one
just a
time. He was the best football player and the best baseball player
at the same time.
And he just did things that nobody else did. Nobody else ever did after that.
He ran over Brian Bosworth. He ran up a wall. He threw a guy out at home plate from dead center field. It was like,
yeah, it's like folk stories. It's
it's what is it, John Henry, and that's kind of his, that's kind of his legend.
Yeah, Paul Bunyan, Henry, Johnny Appleseed, Bo Jackson.
Yeah, but the thing was, it's like it was all true. We saw it. There's video footage of it. I was there.
Yeah, and then when I watched the Bo Jackson 30 for 30, and I think I've talked about this before, that he's an avid hunter, and he sits and he just makes arrows for his bow and stuff. And I'm like, he is like literally the closest thing to there being a green arrow.
Yeah.
In real life. Like, if you were going to make somebody a superhero for real, it's Bo Jackson.
Yeah, absolutely.
He could go out and fight crime, and you'd be like, okay, that seems legitimate.
Yeah, he was, and that's, people these days don't understand the legend of Bo Jackson.
Yeah, he's just one of those figures in sports entertainment that isn't just wrestling, he transcended, and he didn't really do. I know he did appear in a couple movies here and there, but he never really transitioned over into being an actor. But people knew who he was. He became a cultural phenomenon outside of sport.
Yeah.
And it was like Bruce Lee, who, being a great athlete and being an actor and being a performer, that people got to know him and becoming that cultural icon. It's similar, somebody who's who entertains with athletic ability.
Yeah.
Like that. And whether it be in a competition or just to watch somebody do things that you just never saw anybody do.
Yeah.
And I'm sure at some point there'll be other, people like that. But it's, I guess, one of the things I said in the 30 for 30 is he's the last guy that people tell legends about because not everybody saw it. Like now everybody sees everything and things become so,
the
information gets
and in the in the grand scheme of things, his career was really short.
Yeah.
He he played football. He was a baseball player that played football as kind of a hobby. And
actually, he was a football player that played baseball out of spite.
yeah, and then when Yeah, and then he, but playing for the Raiders became his, that was his
Yeah, it was like his part-time job.
that was his hobby.
Yeah. But he was a number 1 draft pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I one time had an argument with people at a trivia one time because they're like, who drafted in what year, in 1986 or whatever, who drafted Bo Jackson? And I'm like, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And when they were doing the answers, they're like, no, it's the Oakland Raiders. And I'm like, absolutely not.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he played baseball because he didn't want to play for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and that was because Tampa Bay lied to him.
Yeah.
They tricked him out of his eligibility to keep him from playing his last season of college baseball. And because he had his options, he went and played for the Royals. Yeah, it's a hell of a story. And I'm glad it's fun to see him in those commercials again.
Yeah.
With the video game and with Bosworth and then it's kind of become hand in hand. I saw a little bit of a thing on Facebook. A friend of mine, I guess he got one of those NES Classics and was playing with his kids. He was playing his son in Temco Ball, and they people were commenting on it. They're like, "Oh, you can't be the Raiders. You can't use Bo Jackson. Give the kid a chance."
Yeah. But it seems like they, on some of the games that are on that thing, they lost some of the rights. Like Punch Out is on there, but it's not Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
Well, they had lost the rights they had released just Punch Out back in the old days. They had lost the rights.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Tyson thing had lapsed. And it's funny, the muscle memory with Punch Out. When you're playing that, you're like, oh, yeah, my fingers just know what to do.
Yeah, I just remember, okay, all right, this is how you beat Glass Joe. And this is how Von Kaiser and Soda Popinski. Some of the best names were in that game.
I think when I played, without losing, what I think because the controller was a little wonky, I think I lost to King Hippo once, but I made it all the way up to Bald Bull.
Nice.
Just kind of like out of not playing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm like, Bald Bull. I'm like, I still got it. That was a lot of wasted youth there.
Yeah, there was.
Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I just got the hand-eye coordination now that I can text while I'm driving a car.
True.
That's why our generation can get away with that.
True.
And hopefully not kill anybody.
Hopefully.
Don't text and drive.
But now that we started talking about the trailers that hit for during the Super Bowl yesterday. What do we get? We got Guardians Volume 2, Pirates of the Caribbean, which looks a little more fun than the last one.
Yeah, that one, it seems like it's got a little bit more interesting than that last one that kind of dragged its feet, not knowing what it wanted to be.
Yeah, well, it was a pirate movie where they weren't at sea. They weren't on a boat. The entire movie, they weren't on a boat. It's like,
Yeah, you're kind of right. There were a couple other things. Life. There wasn't, out of the movie trailers that came out, I wasn't, aside from Guardians of the Galaxy, I wasn't like too psyched for too much of it. And the other thing is, I think, a lot of this stuff starts to leak out. So you start to see it on the internet a little bit before when some of them you'd be like, oh crap, here, it's the first I'm seeing of this movie. I saw a little bit more they did a, whatever this is, the 4th or the 5th Transformers. I guess it's the 5th Transformers movie now.
Yeah, the 5th Transformers movie.
where I am a few
I'm
Transformers movies
not.
behind. I
I'm not interested. I watched the trailer, but I'm like, I'm just not interested.
what I have heard, my brother was telling me, is that this one will be the kickoff for the Hasbro combined universe. That you're going to get this Transformers movie will set the stage for the follow up. He was telling me is going to be a Bumblebee movie.
I'm hearing there's going to be a Bumblebee movie.
And then a Transformers G.I. Joe movie. And then Mask. And somebody, Visionaries might be in there too, or something.
Really?
Yeah, there's a few licenses that they're going to cobble together, and try and get a whole connected universe out of. Maybe Rom the Space Knight too, I think is one of those. Or I guess he's just Rom. I don't know if they can call him Space Knight.
Yeah, I don't think they can call him Space Knight.
But there's with everybody and trying to put together, that's the new hot thing now, that everybody's trying to do a combined universe, where I'm kind of psyched for, because not that we grew up with it, but as kids we had those Universal monster movies that they crossed over, that, you know, Frankenstein and Werewolf, or, you know, Frankenstein and Wolfman and Dracula would show up in each other's movies. And that, to me, was like I was, as a kid, I was more into a movie that had a couple of them in it, as opposed to just Frankenstein or just the Wolfman. I know that some of those movies were better, you know, cinematically. Like Bride of Frankenstein is probably the best of the Universal monster movies. But to me, as a kid, if you gave me one of those monster rally ones when they're all in it, or a couple of them are in it, I ate that shit up.
Oh yeah. Which, that's another thing they're kind of relaunching, is they're relaunching that universe too.
Yeah,
that you know, the new Tom Cruise Mummy movie coming out.
You know, what's funny was
I don't know how I feel about that. It looks like it might be all right.
Yeah, I think it could be. I think they did enough to get it away from the Brandon Fraser Mummy movies to give it a different enough theme.
Yeah.
They had initially were saying that Dracula Unbound movie was going to be the beginning of this combined universe, but that movie apparently was the shits. So
so they're starting it off with the Mummy.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing,
which I'm kind of down for, because I do, like you, I love the Universal monsters. Now,
what I've heard is you're going to get Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, the Invisible Man, and Jaws.
Jaws?
There's that was one of the things they were talking about, because Jaws is inside that Universal
true
world, and there's some talk that Jaws would be part of the combined Universal Monsters movie world.
Okay.
I don't know what it sets up. Maybe, Hooper teams up with Van Helsing to fight Creature from the Black Lagoon in something. Which I'll pay to see.
Absolutely. Absolutely pay to see.
Because that's, I don't know if what you've seen of that Mummy movie, but Russell Crowe is Van Helsing.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Russell Crowe is Van Helsing, so they're and I've heard things that there's going to be a Van Helsing movie, that there's going to be, so there's a lot going on there, and kind of like Marvel, they kind of have it plotted out over the next 10 years.
Yeah, and you know, and that kind of, you know, in that same vein, that seems to be the way a lot of these studios are going with these combined universes, because you're getting, you know, between the Marvel universe and the DC universe, and now I guess whatever this Hasbro universe is, you know, the relaunching of the the Universal monsters,
Universal.
um, the new King Kong movie is coming out this summer, and that's supposed to be in the same universe as the last Godzilla movie, and they're supposed to run into each other at some point, you know. So you know, it could be kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah, I'm psyched for it because it's all those things that I've kind of wanted. It's you know, it's
Yeah,
those Universal movies that we grew up watching, the Godzilla movies, the Marvel and DC stuff that we wanted all those people to live in the same world.
yeah. Oh, except for the Visionaries, because who cares about the Visionaries?
Watch it. My brother will smack you in mouth if he heard you say that. My brother was the biggest fan of Visionary. He had one Visionary toy, but he loved the shit, and it was big as shit. It was this big tank thing, and it came
I was
with
gonna say,
guys.
nobody had Visionaries toys. Nobody had the Visionary toys. It's like no kid owned the USS Flag.
Visionaries, I always felt was one of those unsung, because there was like a cartoon for it. He remembers the whole story. He could tell you the whole.
I remember Visionaries, but I think that might have kind of been like we were starting to get a little older, maybe.
You know what else they could include in that, which was a Hasbro license, was Inhumanoids.
Ooh,
That cartoon was supposed to theoretically have supposed to have taken place in the same world as G.I. Joe.
okay.
But that was the one with the big monsters, the big ancient monsters that lived under the earth, and a team of scientists / soldiers or whatever they were had to fight them. But those were some of those. There were a lot of those good toy license cartoons that didn't. For every Thundercats and GI Joe and He-Man, there was a Visionaries or an Inhumanoids. Or you remember those bug guys? The
Sectars. The Sectars.
I knew a couple people that had
anybody that had any of those things.
I knew people that had a couple of them, and I heard there was a couple. There were these bugs, and they were like bugged themed characters, like action figures. But then their vehicles were these big ass bugs that they could ride, and you worked it almost like a puppet. That it had this like glove on the bottom of it. You put your hand in, and that
it would move the legs and the
yeah. And that'd be the legs for the thing, and then you could fly. You could put your guy on top of it and fly it around with make your hands move for the legs and pick up another guy and throw them and stuff like that. And I don't remember that even having a cartoon. I just remember that being a cool ass.
I think it may have had a cartoon. I know it at least had a comic book.
Yeah, comic book tie-ins were big for all those toys back then too. They spread themselves to a couple different mediums back then. But that was those Insecto toys were a thing that I always thought what should have been a bigger hit and never quite caught on.
With those, I think they kind of fell into that category too of they were an odd size.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You know, because they didn't fit into that 3 3/4 line. You know, they were more Thundercat size.
Yes. That's something that I know I've said this before, that they should have passed a law that there should be a universal size for action figures.
Absolutely. So that way you can play everything with everybody.
Yes.
You know.
I do like the company that's been putting out the action figures.
The reaction figures?
The reaction figures. They did a line of He-Man toys, of He-Man figures. So you could get like a He-Man that would go in line with like your Star Wars and your GI Joes and stuff. You would get,
Nice.
there was like He-Man, Merman, Skeletor, I think.
I'm gonna have to look for those.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun ones with those. That's been a something I definitely like picking up at the conventions when I see stuff. I gave my wife a Captain Cold from the Flash TV series reaction action figure because that's been her favorite character on those shows. It's the dude from Prison Break plays Captain Cold.
Okay. I know the guy you're talking about. I just don't remember his name.
Wentworth Miller.
That's right.
Which is a pretty cool name, too.
That is a pretty cool name.
And then, I don't know, I found that by accident, he was in like an old Mariah Carey video.
Was he really?
Yeah, he was like a love interest in a Mariah Carey video.
Huh.
He was like a male model in the 90s, I guess.
Okay.
Speaking of everything's old is new again, I have with some of these new shows, whether they're mid-season replacements or summer shows or however they're advertising them now. There's a Taken TV series. It's a prequel TV series about how Taken got that way, I guess. Like what he did to get his particular set of skills.
Okay.
And what I'm assuming is like every week somebody in his family gets, or one of his friends or some acquaintance of his gets kidnapped and he has to go save them.
Probably.
And maybe there's like an old wise guy that teaches him how to punch guys in the throat.
Probably. I don't know how well that's going to work.
I'm not sure either. You know, it's.
But I mean, it's, you know, it's I could say that about a lot of things, and one of the things I'm like, when I saw it was coming out, I'm like, this show is going to be horrible, and that was the Lethal Weapon show, which I absolutely love.
You turned me on to a couple people have told me about it, and I finally bit the bullet and started watching it, and I really have been enjoying it. Because it's like one of those old, you know, it's got elements that remind you of the movies, but it's also one of those like 80s cop show.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a CSI or a Law and Order. They're jumping motorcycles and flipping cars and doing things. You know, there's some Starsky and Hutch A-Team type of shit going on in this.
And speaking of jumping motorcycles, have you seen?
I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up to you.
Go here, and then you said jumping
motorcycles,
and it triggered me.
I didn't want to get you too upset. Now I'll just lay the groundwork down here. Growing up, your all-time favorite TV show was Chips.
Absolutely.
You loved you some Chips.
I loved me some Chips. I loved me some Chips so much that last year on my birthday, I turned 40 last year, and on my birthday.
You turned 40 on your birthday?
I turned 40 on my birthday. I got a meet and greet and a photo with Larry Wilcox, Eric Estrada, and Robert Pine from Chips. And they fucking sang me happy birthday. And Eric Estrada kissed me on the cheek. Fuck yeah.
And then, much to your glee, the trailer for the new Chips movie came out.
You use that word. I don't think that word is what it means. I knew it was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be bad because I heard, you know, kind of rated R and whatnot. Yeah.
You know, now this is what I remember. And this is always a sign of problems. You know, whenever something gets tied up in a lot of development hell, I think it's rare that it winds up working.
Yeah, and this movie, this Chips has been talked about since that '70s show.
I was just going to say the same thing.
You know, was a big deal because there was an episode where Fez dressed up like Punch, and it was like at that point it was Wilder Valderrama is going to play Punch in the Chips movie.
Yep. Yeah, they talked about
20 years ago.
A solid 15 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And again, you know, going back to 15 years when they kind of started doing this was when they're taking these 70s and 80s properties that were serious kind of at the time, but also a little ridiculous in aspects, and turning them into these comedies like they did with the Starsky and Hutch movie, like they did with the Dukes of Hazzard movie, 21 Jump Street.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that I'm sure there are, but it's just escaping me right now.
Yeah, the only one that I know like that they did that for me worked was the A-Team movie.
Yes, the A-Team movie. A lot of people hated that, but I enjoyed the A-Team movie because they kept it.
They kept the spirit of the show.
Yeah, and they kind of took it serious for what it was. And I know for a long time they were talking about doing Knight Rider, like Knight Rider with Will Ferrell as Michael Knight.
Yeah. No.
And I was like, oh, that's going to be awful. And I think like something like Lethal Weapon or like one of these remakes where if you take it serious enough, for as ridiculous as it is or was, it'll work. You know, when you start trying to take the piss out of something and goof on it, not necessarily that it was bad, but just because the clothes that they wore then are kind of ridiculous now because it's just not the fashion now. You know, that was some of the joke. That was like some of the jokes of Starsky and Hutch. It was how their hair looked and what they wore.
Yeah.
But they were like that. They were the fashionable dudes then wearing that shit. And with this Chips thing and like goofing on the brown uniforms, and you know they do that in the trailer. I'm like, that was what the uniform was.
That's still what the uniform is. You know, and the actual CHP, the actual California Highway Patrol, didn't allow them to use the logos, from what I understand. So any of the logos and like the badge designs and stuff have to be completely different because of the way they're kind of mocking mocking it and I think in the trailer alone, I think Tom, who does Hot Tag with us, made note that there were no less than 6 dick references in the 2-minute trailer.
Yeah. Yeah, and that to me, again, like you could do a little bit of that, but if you're going to sell it on that that it's a movie about dick jokes, and I feel it's one of those things. Just from the trailer, I feel like there were 3 scripts that they cherry picked from to get a movie that's not going to be that good. Because I mean, some of the base story of it that it's kind of interesting that all right, Ponch isn't a cop, but he's an undercover FBI agent, and John is a he's a great motorcycle cop, but a bit of a
No, he's not even a motorcycle cop. He's a like X Games guy that like decides to join the police force to win his ex-wife back or something like that.
Oh.
So neither one of them are cops. It just looks awful.
Yeah, I felt bad for you when I saw it.
And that was the thing. I was expecting it. I was expecting it to be bad, but I don't even think I expected it to be that bad.
On the flip side, from when I saw it, and then I'm thinking, if I had control and I had to make the decisions, how I would envision Chips is Fast and the Furious with motorcycle cops.
Yeah.
You have your car stunts, you have your motorcycle stunts. It's a cop movie. They get tied up into something, and Chips it was weird because it would be like, we got to check these drug dealers, but also I promised I would go, play catch with the police athletic league.
Yeah, there was always that, and I mean, that was the thing. There was always, it was a 70s, early 80s show. So it's light.
Yeah.
But
a lot of those shows, I was never a huge Starsky and the guy that watched Starsky and Hutch, but like Quincy,
yeah.
That whole concept of that show is ridiculous, but I'll watch the shit out of it.
Oh yeah.
And Chips, I thoroughly enjoy. I loved Chips as a kid. It was probably like, I'll say it was one of those like perfect shows in that it had a good theme song. It had a good opening credits.
Yeah.
The shows, kept your interest enough. It did, it had from
enough action. There was the humor. There was,
Yeah. And it had its TNA. There was always some bikini girls running around.
Yeah. Poncho's always trying to get the girl. And
yeah. And they poured him into some of the tightest pants that a man could wear.
Oh, absolutely.
So I feel your pain that it's just not what we wanted it to be. But the same thing with, like, as much as I love the guys from Broken Lizard, and I don't hate that Dukes of Hazzard movie, but there were a lot of, like, we got to interject some gags into this that aren't in that Dukes of Hazzard type of theme, that I think they updated that movie, but they still kind of kept enough
of what the show was.
Yeah.
I get that, it's Chips hasn't been on the air, aside from like reruns on MeTV in like 35 years.
Yeah.
But that was really one of the times I can say, like, watching a trailer, like, my heart hurt. And I expected it to be that, and my heart still hurt.
Yeah, until I had seen the trailer, I really hadn't heard much about it. And then when I saw it, I was just let down.
Yeah. And that was the thing. Like, I had heard that they were doing it, and I knew Dax Shepard was involved, so I didn't really have high hopes for it. But then I'm like, all right, well, it's still a ways off. And then, like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's the trailer. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, they really kind of kept it under wraps. I don't know if they kept it under wraps or they just kind of shot it and sat on it for a little bit.
I think it was kind of both. I think they kind of shot it and went, oh, all right, this is a hunk of shit. God damn it. But anyway,
the other thing that kind of caught the remake that caught me by surprise, and this is another movie to television show remake, is Time After Time.
Yeah, and I don't remember this movie. Before we came on, I watched the trailer for this. I'm like, this is kind of cool. I would watch this.
It was something I discovered on HBO in like the 80s. It kind of came on a day that I was homesick from school. And I'm like, what's this? And I had probably just read The Time Machine. And I'm like, oh, H.G. Wells. And I was into all that. And here it's the story of H.G. Wells battling Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
And when they took the time machine to modern day San Francisco. and it was a fun sci-fi movie, 1979, and now they adapted it into a TV show, which, at least to my knowledge, is the third time travel TV show that's going to be on the air right now. I think NBC has one where people travel time to go right wrongs, kind of in like a time cop type of way.
Yeah,
that people they're stopping people from committing crimes in the past. CW has that the Legends of Tomorrow, the DC time traveling superhero show. And now
at one point they had to go back in time and save George Lucas or something on that show.
Yeah, they just did that. That was last week. They were in 1968 California at film school, and they accidentally caused George Lucas. Well, one of their battles caused George Lucas to leave film school, and Ray Palmer and the other guy, the guy that's the archaeologist or historian, both their pasts were changing because without seeing Star Wars, they were never inspired to become a scientist, and without seeing Indiana Jones to become a historian. So they were becoming like yoga instructors and like math teachers or something like that.
Nice.
And it was the way they introduced the character, where when I saw it, I'm like, that's going to be George Lucas. So that was a fun episode, and it was the episode was titled "Raiders of the Lost Art."
Nice.
And what made it even better for me is the group of villains that are in the show. It's Reverse Flash, Damien Dark, and Merlin, the archer. They started calling them the Legion of Doom.
Nice.
And even made the reference of like, oh, it's from a Hanna-Barbera cartoon I watched as a kid.
Nice.
So I'm like, the Legion of Doom is trying to kill George Lucas. I'm like, this is
the greatest thing ever.
And superheroes have to save him to save Star Wars. I'm like, oh my God, 9-year-old me went and wrote a TV show. But I think I'm going to check. I was a huge fan of the Time After Time, the film. I'm going to give the TV show a shot.
Yeah, it looks like that comes out next month. It starts next month. It's kind of like a mid-season.
Yeah, I think it's a mid-season replacement. Yeah. It's so weird now. They have mid-season replacements, and then they have these like spring to summer shows.
Yeah.
Which I don't mind because you would hit these points where you'd be watching nothing. I'd be going back. In the off seasons of shows, it's nice because me and my wife catch up on stuff that we never quite saw. I'm finally in the last season of Battlestar Galactica.
Okay.
Speaking of remakes, again, that came out good. I mean, they could have made a crappy Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, that Battlestar show was really good.
And it was critically done. It was critically acclaimed. That it was written well and put together well. Some of the episodes look a little cheap, but what are you gonna do? It was Sci-Fi Network.
Yeah.
And I would almost rather some of these shows have a lower budget and the effects are a little cheaper than if they're on a major media, if they're on NBC, ABC, CBS, there's so much risk there that they'll cancel those shows quicker.
Yeah.
Because there was that time travel show with the dinosaurs that was on Fox
Primeval?
for a little bit. No, it wasn't Primeval. That was the BBC one with the
Okay.
dinosaurs. That was when the dinosaurs were coming to modern times. This is when people from a dystopian future were trying to set up a colony in prehistoric Earth.
Okay. Yeah.
And it had Stephen Lang in it. It had the guy, he was on the American version of Life on Mars, and now he's on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He's an Australian actor. I can't think of his name. And I really enjoyed that show, but it was like, this has got to be expensive as shit. I don't think anybody's watching it. because it had dinosaurs and it had explosions and it had all this stuff. And I'm like, this has got to be like, it was like watching a movie every week, special effects wise. And they kind of left you with a cliffhanger going to the next season, that they were laying groundwork, that stuff was going on with time travel. And I really wanted time travel and Nazis fighting dinosaurs, but the show got canceled.
Yeah, but we did kind of get dinosaurs fighting time traveling Nazis.
We did.
And probably the most epic half-hour movie ever.
Kung Fury. There's supposed to be a second Kung Fury too, isn't there?
That's what I'm hearing.
I don't know if that. I think that's lightning in a bottle. I don't know if they could.
I don't know. Like, yes, that's one of those movies that again, it's like it shouldn't. There's nothing about it should have worked for a half hour, like little independent thing. It should have worked. It worked well. But that kind of fault, goes into some of my weekend too, where I was, I wasn't really watching the football game yesterday, and I kind of binge watched all 4 Sharknado movies. And as weird as it sounds, like watching them all together, like in a row like that, each one got better. Because the most recent one is now on Netflix, and I hadn't seen it when it was on over the summer. Stupid movies, but so much fun.
Yeah. And sometimes that's what you need.
Yeah.
It's Oscar season again.
Yeah.
And I've been watching Oscar films. I've been trying to play catch up with Oscar films. The Best Picture nominees, which I had not seen any of when the announcements came out. I hadn't seen anything that somebody for any of the Best Picture awards, for any of the acting awards. Some of the special effects movies were the only thing I had seen. And so I'm playing catch up, and those movies are always so deep and heavy and emotional that I gotta watch something silly and stupid just to like balance me out a little bit. And I like a good arts picture. I like Oscar nominated movies. I like seeing strong performances. I watched Fences with Denzel Washington.
Yeah,
that was based on a play from the 80s that James Earl Jones had originated that part that Denzel Washington's playing. And it was a deep and intense movie. It was like watching it was a play, it was the film version of a play, which that was probably my only criticism of it, that it's very static for a film. It doesn't go to, it doesn't really have many locations in it, because the play all took place in like the backyard of a house over several years.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of gravitas that you get in a play that I think a film loses. But the performances were really strong. But after it, I'm like, I have to watch something stupid after this, because I just feel like it's just too heavy. And then the same thing happened to me. I watched Manchester by the Sea, the Casey Affleck film.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, after that, I'm like, show me something stupid, just so I'm watching episodes of Bob's Burgers just to kind of laugh and cleanse my palate a little bit.
Yeah, you have to.
And that's why I'll always love those bad movies. I was flipping around, and like Lake Placid versus Anaconda was on the other day, and I watched like 30 seconds of that. I'm one of those weird people that, as much as I love a good movie, I love a bad movie.
Me too. I love a bad movie. But I mean, there are movies that are bad movies that I'm like, I can't watch this. And then there are movies that are bad, so bad they're good.
Yes.
That a good chunk of those Sci-Fi Channel movies fall into that category. There are some that have been really bad and unwatchable, but
they are great things just if you're sitting on a couch and you got nothing else to do, and you're just like, I'm gonna watch this god awful movie.
Yep.
It's like you're living your own episode of Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah.
Which is again something else I can't wait for this spring. I'm psyched for that.
Yeah, I am excited about the new season of Mystery Science Theater. That should be, I think, exclusively on Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix. There are a couple other things that were coming to Netflix that I was pretty psyched about. Mystery Science Theater was one of them, and then something else I think they announced was going to be. Have you seen? There is a remake of One Day at a Time on Netflix.
Is there?
Found it completely by accident. We were watching something else, and I'm looking around, and there was an advertisement. I'm like, One Day at a Time, and I played it. I played the opening for it, and it's the same song. It's a little different. The family in it is Cuban, and it takes place in Florida.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more ethnic than the original, but everything, kind of everything that I've heard from it, it's been like, oh, this is pretty enjoyable.
Huh.
I haven't sat and watched a full episode, but I watched probably 5 minutes of the first one, and I'm like, this doesn't seem that bad. And so I put it on my list as something to check out.
Yeah, I'll have to look for it.
But I hadn't heard anything about it. It just kind of was there, and I'm like, oh, One Day at a Time. I think it was when we were binge watching Stranger Things I found it.
Yeah.
Which
is something I'm going to have to, buckle down and binge watch in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you have to. It was Stranger Things and Fuller House was our.
I tried Fuller House. I got through 20 minutes of the pilot episode of Fuller House. I'm like, I can't do this.
I bit the bullet. I got through it, and I've enjoyed it. And it's stupid.
Yeah,
it's sappy, but to me, it is as funny as any other dumb sitcom.
Oh, I'm sure.
That's it has that vibe of that late 80s, early 90s sitcom where I've kind of tried watching something. I watched the first season of Parks and Recreation because that kind of slipped past me, and I'm like, let me check this out. I heard good things about it, and I think I made the mistake of watching that after I finished watching The British Office. Okay, because that was something that I kind of I took my time watching that. I didn't want to binge watch it. I wanted to absorb it a little bit.
Yeah.
And with going from British Office to Parks and Recreation, and I'm like, oh my God, they're just doing The Office.
Yeah, well, I mean, The Office was, the American Office was, for that first season or so, was literally shot for shot.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
it's The Office. They're using
the same but that's what I'm saying. It's like and Parks and Rec is kind of a spin-off, or was supposed to originally have been a spin-off of The Office.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense.
Kind of in that same, it's kind of that shared universe thing where it's the camera crew following around, the people that work there.
Yeah.
And I think it's supposed to be like the same camera crew, just making a different documentary.
Good. I hope Ricky Gervais got a couple bucks out of it, because I'm sitting there watching it. I'm like, he should sue somebody. Yeah, and not necessarily that it wasn't that funny. It just was. I'm like, they're just doing the same. They're doing all the same shit.
Yeah.
It's female David Brent.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. But hey, it gave us Chris Pratt, so
yeah.
Oh, we got Star-Lord out of it.
It's funny, in that first season he's all fat.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he like trimmed up.
So I might once I'm done with my Oscar movies, I guess I'm going to give season 2 of that a shot.
Give Parks and Rec a legit chance.
And I think you should give Fuller House a legit chance.
I'll give Fuller House a legit chance.
Yeah, that was something else that we, with our Super Bowl, we wound up talking about, and we were talking about how DJ from Fuller House is our age.
Yeah,
And my friend's son, who's 17, is like, she's your age? Like, how do you guys look like such sacks of crap? And she,
yeah.
and I'm like, well, she's a born again Christian, and she's rich, and she's married to a rich guy, and money goes a long way.
Player.
But then the other girl was like a crackhead for 10 years, and she looks good. So,
yeah, she was on meth, I think.
Was it meth? Okay, something like that. Meth, crack.
I think it was on meth.
Okay.
Well,
she did meth. She did meth for 10 years, and she looks like $1 million. So it's.
Yeah. I think she was saved by Dr. Drew.
Did she really?
I think so. I think she was saved by Dr. Drew. Or she was on one of the celebrity rehab shows, I think.
Well, it's nice to know that he actually saved somebody after all those people that he killed.
Yeah.
Because he didn't help the guy from Taxi, and he didn't help China, and he didn't help.
He didn't help Jamie Lane or whatever.
Yeah.
Warren.
Yeah, Dr. Drew should be in jail.
Probably.
On that note.
And nothing after that.
Yeah, well, this was kind of our warm-up coming back show after we had our self-imposed hiatus. Yeah, we had to work things out creatively.
Yeah. And then next week we will have a guest with us next week. Our good buddy Jay will be back on with us. Talk about some of the projects he's got coming up, some of the stuff he's been working on since we talked with him last. I'm sure madness shall ensue, as it normally does.
Yeah, we always wound up all over the board with him. We wound up talking a little bit of everything, and
and we got con season kind of starting up, so we'll possibly be coordinating with him a little bit and seeing where he's at and where we're at and where we're going to be and what we're going to be doing. So we'll hopefully be seeing more of us.
Indeed,
yes. So anyway, that's where we'll wrap it up. You know where to find us. We're on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. Look for us on Facebook at the Channel Z Podcasts. So we will see you next week. I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And enjoy some good TV.
Or bad TV.
Or both.
Or read a book.
True. But who has time for that? Ain't nobody got time for that.